They were halfway through a gear check when the rotor wash died, and the hangar settled into a humming quiet. Senior Airman Naya Solis slipped in, hauling 2 overstuffed deployment duffels that banged against her knees with each step. Someone whistled low. Someone else snickered. She felt the weight of eyes latch onto the pale seams that laddered her forearms and neck, the faint sheen that scars always carry under fluorescence. "Yes, the rumor's true," said a loadmaster with a haircut that belonged on a recruiting poster. He didn't whisper. Maintenance finally let a ghost out of the tool cage. A second voice chimed in, tart with amusement. "She keep those stitches as a fashion statement or a warning label." The words skittered across metal walls, thin and sharp. Naya hitched the duffels higher, eyes on the floor striping. The pararescue beret was long boxed away, replaced by a plain cap. Injuries had a way of changing job titles. She knew how this movie usually played. Jokes first, then questions she never answered, then silence that felt like exile. "Let her work," called Tech Sergeant Mia Park from the avionics bench, more tired than angry. "We're behind." Naya nodded thanks without looking up. Her hands trembled as she started inventory. Litter straps, blankets, saline, spare batteries, things that meant hope when the world went sideways. The tremor steadied as the rhythm returned. Count, check, stow. She could do this. Head down, get through the day, make the noise small. A laugh drifted from the crew lounge. "Paper rescue," someone said, and the phrase clicked into the old place in her ribs where it always hurt. She swallowed. The air tasted like grease and ocean salt. She thought of a different air, smoky, wet, and hot, of sirens swallowed by wind, of a rope that burned through gloves, of a child's voice that still found her in sleep. Her scars weren't trophies. They were coordinates, but nobody here knew the map. That night's wind lived in her bones. Cyclone Ashari didn't so much hit the archipelago as chew it, spit it out, and come back for seconds. The island's hospitals buckled early, power died early, comms died with it. All anyone had were flares, flashlights, stubbornness. The Pavehawk's searchlight had painted the world in swinging cones of white. Roofs like torn teeth, buses belly up, water where streets had been 5 hours earlier. "Hoist jammed," came the flight engineer's voice, brittle with disbelief. "It's jammed." "Manual," Naya said without thinking. Her voice had surprised her too. She'd already clipped herself to the steel, already fed the slack across her shoulder. The water below was a nervous animal, slapping itself against the collapsed pedestrian bridge where a clutch of survivors clung like barnacles. "Copy manual," the pilot said. "Say again your name." "Solis," she answered. "Naya," as if names mattered to the wind. The cable had bit through glove leather and into palm, and the world shrank to hand's breadth, the rhythm of a machine you could only feel. Down she went, through rain that turned bright under the searchlight, through roasted plastic smoke. A girl in a yellow raincoat stared up at her with theater-wide eyes. 7 years old maybe, not crying, jaw set like a tiny general. The cable jerked, the world lurched, and the bridge screamed. "On you," Naya said to the girl when her boots found rebar. "We're going up." "Not without him," the girl said, and pointed at a man trapped to his waist in concrete jam. Fear had a taste. Naya knew it well. She also knew triage, and that knowledge was a cruel friend. But the man's hand was on the girl's wrist, and she didn't understand separation as anything but betrayal. "Okay," Naya said. Then were 3. The first lift scarred her palms. The second carved her neck where the sling slid and a shard kissed skin. The third took the rest of the skin off her left thumb. By the fourth, her own breath was a whistle. Morning at Vandever Air Station broke blue and almost gentle, gulls arguing over nothing. The crew lounge television murmured about weather patterns that meant nothing if you had tasted a cyclone from underneath. Naya sat at the edge of the bench with a mug of coffee heavy as a brick. Loadmaster Rafferty, gelled hair, charming when he remembered to be, leaned in the doorway and pretended to study a checklist. "Hey, Solis," he said casually, "got a question. You paratypes ever learn the difference between being a hero and being a hazard?" Mia didn't look up from a circuit board. "Read the room, Raf." What? I'm making conversation. Naya set down her mug. My last hazard assessment saved 7 people, she said evenly. My last hero moment got me reclassified to medical supply. I prefer the first. Rafferty blinked, realizing too late he'd stepped into something deeper than a quip. Well. Okay then. A whistle blew from the hangar. All hands, someone shouted. Brief, in 5. They drifted in, buzzing like bees. Pilots, crew chiefs, medics carrying clipboards. The wing commander rarely attended morning briefs. Rumor said he'd been pinned to a desk 2 counties away. But when Brigadier General Cade Rourke stepped through the sliding door, the background hum collapsed into a respectful hush that had its own gravity. Rourke was one of those faces people swore they'd seen in a textbook. Clean lines, storm gray hair, a look that read rooms like Sergeant Major Gospel. He moved to the front with a purposeful economy. Ferry drill at 0900, he said. We'll run a dual hoist scenario. Want no surprises when tourist season tries to drown itself again. He scanned faces the way old pilots scan an instrument panel. Quick, practiced, never wasting a glance. Then the glance paused, landed, stopped moving. Naya felt it before she saw it. The attention that tightens the air. Airman, he said, and the room's axis shifted toward her. Name. She stood automatically back straight. Solis, sir. Senior Airman Naya Solis. Rourke's jaw worked once, as if the word had to clear some private turbulence. Solis, he repeated softer. When did you get here? 2 weeks ago, sir. That tracks, he said to himself, and something like relief moved across his face and was gone. No one expected the Brigadier General to deviate from agenda. He did. Before we talk cables and winches, Rourke said, You're going to hear something you should have known already. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Silence coalesced like mist. Last year, he began Cyclone Ashari-gutted Sanarillo province. We were wheels up out of Kadena and over the island 12 hours later. The first night, a pedestrian bridge failed. A group of civilians, parents, kids, stranded between a fire and a flood. Our hoist jammed. The storm didn't care. He looked at Naya, and time folded. One of my pararescuemen clipped onto a partially manual line and descended anyway. She lashed herself to the broken span, built a makeshift belay out of a traffic sign and stubbornness, and started sending people up 2 by 2. Somebody exhaled hard through nose. Another shifted, boots squeaking. She refused extraction 3 times. Rourke said, Clip now, like he was fighting the urge to put a fist through a wall. On the 4th, she finally let us take her. Not because she was bleeding through her gloves and couldn't feel her left hand. Not because a piece of roofing iron opened her neck and she needed pressure. She stepped on the sling because the last child had already gone. Rafferty swallowed. Mia set her soldering iron down. Rourke's gaze moved from face to face, never theatrical, only precise. That pararescueman is Senior Airman Solis. You're cracking jokes about the cost of courage you didn't have to pay. He let the weight of it sit. If you've got something to say to her, say it after you practice saying thank you first. The room's temperature changed. There are silences you earn with cruelty and silences you earn with awe. This was the second kind. Naya wanted to melt into the floor. She also wanted to breathe for the first time in weeks. Carry on, Rourke said, but nobody simply carried on. Not after that. The ferry drill became a live-wire test bed. The Pavehawk sat on the apron like a promise as crews snapped into motion. Naya found herself beside Rafferty at the hoist station. He looked like he wanted to apologize, but had no language for it yet. You ever run a 2-person pick with a panicking casualty? She asked, purely practical. He shook his head. Simulated, sure. Sim doesn't flail. She hooked a safety line through the training dummy's harness, and then through her own. When they thrash, tuck your elbow inside your own frame. Don't try to muscle them. You'll just both drown. Make her shape the wall. Rafferty mirrored her, jaw working. Copy. Mia approached with a headset and a flashlight she didn't need. Need a 3rd pair of hands? Always, Naya said. They lifted, steady as breath, the cable thrumming faintly. The rotor wash grabbed her coveralls and tried to make a mess of them. She taught through it. Where to look, what the body does when fear overrides obedience, why voice tone beats volume 9 times out of 10. Words anchored her. So did the work. When they touched down, Rafferty unclipped and took a step back, helmet under arm. About earlier, he started. You owe me nothing, Naya said, then amended, because something in his face reminded her of herself the first time she'd had to apologize to a corporal she'd misread. But I'll take a promise you'll listen first next time. Deal, he said, a little strangled, like his throat had a splinter. Rourke watched from the shadow of the hangar, hands laced behind his back. For a moment, Naya met his eyes across the distance. He tilted his head once, the smallest nod. She pretended the wind had gotten in her eyes. It came back when she let it, in clean cuts instead of the messy spool nightmares preferred. The makeshift belay, the girl's thin wrist under her fingers. The man in the concrete, whispering a prayer not to be heard, but because a person's mouth has to do something while their body waits on a miracle. You a swimmer? Naya had asked the man. A bad one, he'd admitted, a humor shred in it that made her like him. Good. Bad swimmers obey instructions. Is that a rule? It is today. She'd wedged the sling under the girl's arms, counted down with the flight engineer, and felt the cable go light as hope. The wind had tried to slap them off the bridge. The rebar had tried to claim her leg the way it had claimed his. When they hauled the girl up, the man had closed his eyes like he was willing himself lighter so the next lift would be kinder. What's your name? She'd asked him, because names build bridges inside chaos. Mateo, he'd said. And yours? Naya. Like the river, he'd said, and she hadn't known that, but loved it instantly. The second lift took Mateo to the edge of the jam, and then the cable jerked, vomited slack. The hoist had coughed and choked and jammed itself stubborn again. Manual, the engineer had said, exhausted. I am sorry, Solis. I am sorry. Naya had looked at Mateo and at the child absence beside her where the girl had been. In the space where fear should have bloomed, a different thing grew. Tie me, she told her own body. Tie me to this place. The traffic sign bolt had held. Her hands had become instruments. You could be bigger than the moment if you accepted pain as a tax instead of a wall. When they finally hauled Mateo free, he didn't cry. He reached blindly for her hand and found it, and she let him squeeze until her knuckles went white, and only then let herself be the next thing on the line. The base had a tradition newer than its buildings and older than its paint. After a chewing out or a calling up, people found the memorial wall. Naya went at dusk, when the sky did its best impression of mercy. Names were carved shallow, and even pilots, crew chiefs, pararescue, medics, all alphabetized back into order. You always come alone? Rourke asked, not appearing so much as materializing beside her. Generals shouldn't move quietly. He did. It's easier, Naya said. Less to explain. My first wall, he said, as if the wall were a person he'd once been married to. I tried to read every name out loud. You learn fast that grief isn't a list. They stood a long time without talking. The trick to silence was treating it like a living thing. Don't crowd it. Let it move between you. I didn't want the briefing to be about me, Naya said finally. It wasn't, Rourke said. It was about the standard. He was quiet then. I was above you that night. Different bird, different angle. I watched your hands bleed through infrared. You did not stop once. I didn't want to regret stopping, she said. Regret feels heavier than concrete. He nodded, a small acceptance. You thinking of leaving? He asked, too blunt to be fishing. More like triage. I was, she admitted. I'm tired of rooms where my story walks in before I do. Then write the next chapter yourself, he said. He reached into his pocket and drew out a small coin, winged, stamped with a unit crest and the year. We give these too often posthumously. I prefer not to wait. He set it in her palm with a weight that felt outsized to its metal. For the standard, she closed her fingers around it, because that was better than crying. You can't live inside a story. You can only use it. The next week, Naya built a training gauntlet that looked like a dare from physics. A smoked-out fuselage mock-up riddled with crawl spaces, a pool drill with tarps to simulate black water, a deck slicked to mimic diesel. We'll fail here, so we don't fail out there, she told the crews. Fail loud. Fail honest. Fix it in daylight. Rafferty volunteered to go first, pride and penance both. He got tangled in the tarp, panicked just enough that his breath clawed, then remembered her elbow trick and made himself a wall. When he surfaced, he was laughing, giddy with the relief of competence, not just bravado. Mia worked the smoke maze second and came out coughing but triumphant, soot spiderwebbed across her cheeks. "You're evil," she told Naya. Affection threaded through it like stitching. "Correct," Naya said. Again. They ran it until night shift begged for quiet on the flight line. Naya kept the tempo, just under braking. She corrected gently where correction would land, sharply where sharpness would stick. She put a hand on a shoulder once in a while and left it there 1 second longer than comfort dictated, because contact can teach, too. By the end, no one joked about scars. They compared friction burns. They swapped blister tape. They learned how to hold a stranger's fear without making it a mirror. The hangar, which had sounded like a tin can full of rocks a week ago, found a different music. The scrape of discipline, the thunk of gear, the low hum of people becoming a team on purpose. On the way out, Rafferty fell into step beside Naya. "Standard," he said, trying to word out like a new tool. "I like that better than hero." "So do I," she said. "Heroes are statues. Standards have to keep moving." It was a Thursday when the world tested the lesson. The tourist ferry Morning Star put out a Mayday 20 minutes off the point, engine fire in the lower deck, smoke up through the stairwells. The ocean had that glassy, deceitful calm that precedes chaos. Dispatch voices braided and unbraided across the radio. "Dual hoist," Rourke said, calm as a metronome. "Two birds. Solis, you're on anchor with Rafferty. Park, your safety in comms." Naya's heart did the thing hearts do when danger says its name. Sped up, then found a rhythm. In the Pave Hawk, she checked the carabiners twice, then again. "We're not heroes today," she told Rafferty over the roar. "We're competent." "Copy competent," he said, mouth tight. They came in low over smoke that rose like a column, the ferry rolling like a sleep-fighting child. People packed the aft rail, faces turned skyward with a naked relief that breaks your chest. Naya felt something old and terrible uncoil and then sit like a dog that had learned heel. She could work with this. "Cable live," the engineer called. "Anchor on," Naya answered, and out they went, wind fists punching, salt clawing at throats. She made herself the wall like she taught. She made her voice a rope. "I have you. You're going to feel the lift. Keep your hands inside your frame. We'll count together." The first pickup was a teenager whose bravado had cracked. He sobbed apologies to no one and everyone. The second was a woman in a life jacket and a fury. "My mother. She can't climb," the woman gasped, pointing. "Please. We'll handle her together," Naya said. Rafferty matched her move for move, hand steady. Mia's voice in their ears was a cool river. "Anchor. Your line is perfect. Bird 2 has the forward rail. You have 5 to go, then shift." They moved as if they had practiced it for years because, in a way, they had, in a smoky fuselage, under a tarp, in a hangar where jokes had found no purchase. When an elderly man locked in fear lunged and flailed, Naya tucked her elbow in and made herself the wall. When a child clung and refused, she made her voice a different kind of wall. "I've got you. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. After, the ferry smoked quietly like a scolded dragon, and the ocean glimmered as if nothing dramatic had happened at all. People dripped gratitude onto the deck, trembling and laughing and promising diets and prayers. The pilots floated their birds down, gentle as forgiveness. Back on the apron, the world smelled of jet fuel and wet clothes and relief. Rafferty peeled off his gloves and stared at his hands like they'd told him a secret. "We did it," he said. All the bravado punched out, only wonder left. "You did it," Naya corrected. "We did it together." Mia jogged over, headset crooked around her neck. "Comms were a dream," she reported, then grinned, letting herself be a human again. "Also, I might cry and I want you both to pretend not to see." Rourke approached with the careful gait of a man who knows celebration can sour into sentimentality if you push too hard. He stopped a meter away, eyes raking the team like a diagnostic. No injuries? Just pride, Rafferty said, then flinched at his own choice of word and smiled sheepishly. In a good way. Rourke looked at Naya. Not through her. At her. Standard, he said simply. Standard, she echoed. Something moved at the edges then, shuffling, boots aligning, the organized chaos of a base deciding to do the right thing without being told. It started with one crew chief, then a medic, then a pilot, then Mia, then Rafferty, then all of them, spine straightening, hands rising, palms horizontal. Not the stiff salute of parade fields. The kind you give to a person, not a flag. The kind that says, we misjudged, and we learned. Naya's throat tightened, but the old panic didn't come. The cyclone inside her had gone quieter. She returned the salute because dignity is a loop, not a line. Later, alone with the coin in her palm and the hangar's echoes settling, she traced the stamped crest with a thumb that still carried a slick of fairy diesel. Her scars hummed under her skin the way old roads hum in summer heat. They were not shame. They were not warning labels. They were the maps she carried that told her, again and again, here there be storms, and here you stood anyway. If you took anything from that day, she hoped it was this. Courage is not the part where people clap. Courage is the part where you make yourself a wall for someone else's fear and let them climb. The applause comes later, if at all. The standard remains, patient and unglamorous, asking only,